If you've been learning about the guitar for any amount of time, chances are that you've heard of something called the circle of fifths. You've probably heard it a gazillion times. Circle of fifths, circle of fifths, circle of fifths. You got to learn a circle of fifths. You got to practice the circle of fifths. The circle of fifths is the key to knowing music theory. But what is the circle of fifths even for? Because as someone who's literally gotten a master's degree in jazz guitar, I'm going to tell you right now that I actually barely use the circle of fifths, only for a couple of situations. So I want to show you what you can actually use the circle of fifths for to actually benefit your playing rather than just thinking it's something they got to memorize. So let's jump right into it. So up here, I actually compiled just a couple of different versions of the circle of fifths that I've seen posted on various music theory Facebook groups. And let's just take a look at these for a second. So this is one version of the circle of fifths. Okay, this is there's a lot of stuff going on here. There's some shapes in the middle too, on top of that. Not sure exactly what we're supposed to do with this. Let's look at another version of the circle of fifths. Let's see if it'll be a little bit more helpful. Oh my God, what is this? So we got the circle of fifths, and then we have this thing called I guess a Tonitz graph. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce that, but okay. Still not totally sure how this is going to help me play guitar better or play better solos or anything like that. It looks like this circle of fifths is sort of even more complicated than the first one we looked at. Okay, let's look onto the next and last version of the circle of fifths that I found. So this one here, actually, this one's from Wikipedia. Sorry. So if you go on Wikipedia, look up circle of fifths, this is the one that's going to pop up. Let's forget about those first two versions because we really don't need those. Okay. Now, whoever made those things, maybe they know something I don't. There's some kind of amazing way of looking at the circle of fifths that actually genuinely helps. But this version of the circle of fifths here is a lot simpler, actually, believe it or not, than those other versions, and it's a lot more useful. So let's go over what the circle of fifths is even for, okay, in my opinion. So to me, the circle of fifths is for literally for practicing. What I've used the circle of fifths for is essentially practicing things in all keys. It's just a nice way to sort of conceptualize how we can do things in different keys, in my opinion. Now, there's people who use it for conceptualizing the different chords that are in a key, different relationships between keys, and while that's all well and good, this is the primary purpose. So if you want to, that sort of answers the question, what is the circle of fifths for? It's for practicing it in all 12 keys. But of course, me just telling you that isn't going to really help you either, because I want to show you exactly how you can use the circle of fifths to practice in all 12 keys and be able to actually understand the different things that you may learn on the guitar in all 12 keys. Things such as the major scale, things such as triads, different seventh chords, etc., etc. I did another video recently, how you should practice anything on guitar, and one of the main points of that was that it's extremely important to practice all the concepts that you learn in all 12 keys. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you hit the like button below. I really appreciate it, and also subscribe. It's going to help the channel out a lot, and it'll help you out a lot by giving you more awesome guitar videos. So, for example, how would I use this to practice in all 12 keys? Well, let's take the major scale, for example, okay? Most of you know this very, very simple major scale pattern. So you got C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. It's just a C major scale. So if I want to practice that major scale pattern in all 12 keys, what I may do is go around the circle of fifths, either clockwise or counterclockwise. So, for example, I will now, instead of playing it in C major, I'm going to try playing it in G major. So, actually, for this purpose, we're going to keep it super simple. I'm actually just going to move the pattern on the same exact set of strings, okay? So, this pattern was starting on the 3rd fret of the 5th string, which is a C, because it's a C major scale. And now instead, I'm going to start it from a G. Okay, so now I know where G major scale is. And then I'm going clockwise along the circle of fifths, so the next key is going to be D, D major, okay? So I started the major scale pattern from a D, and then I'll start it from an A, because that's the next one. And then E, and then B. So I'm not going to play every single key right now, but just want to explain to you that is a way that we can use the circle of fifths to practice all 12 keys. Now, why would we even use the circle of fifths to practice all 12 keys instead of, let's say, just moving up a half step every time, okay? So the reason for this is because as we go around the circle of fifths, each of those keys actually only has one note difference between them. So what do I mean by this? So for example, the key of C major, which is the one that's always at the top in the middle, the 12 o'clock position in the circle of fifths. If we go to the key of G major, which is this 1 o'clock position, suppose, that only literally has one note different between them. So if you notice, in the key of C major, you'll see underneath it, you'll see this little natural sign, if you're familiar with what that sign is, because all the notes in the key of C major are natural. But when we go to the key of G major, we only have one sharp note, okay? So that is one reason why it's useful to use the circle of fifths, because all the keys are actually not that different as we go along the circle of fifths. So funny enough, the favorite thing of guitar players to do is to play something up or down a half step. So if I play C major, and then I go, okay, I want to play it in a different key. Let me just move everything up 1 fret. Well, guess what? Now that's the key of C sharp major. And believe it or not, for most instruments, and just conceptually, C sharp major is literally the most distant key that we could possibly get from the key of C major. Why? Because every single note in the key has to change. Every key has to move up a half step in order for us to get that key. Whereas from the key of C major to the key of G major, we actually only have to change one note. And in this case, it would actually be the note F sharp. So in the key of C major, we have C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And then in the key of G major, we have G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Okay? So that's the same thing too when we go to the left or counterclockwise on the circle of fifths. So from the key of C major to the key of F major, instead of adding a sharp, we add a flat. So the key of F major only has one flat in it, and it actually happens to be B flat. So how do we even start to figure out what notes have to be sharp and what notes have to be flat? Because that's actually really important, not just to understand the circle of fifths and to be able to use this to play through different keys, but also so you just know what notes are in the different keys that are available. And I think that is actually a lot more important than memorizing the circle of fifths, is to memorize what are the actual names of the notes that are in a different key. So let's talk about key signatures for a second. So if you notice all around that circle of fifths diagram there's these little like music staffs that have a treble clef, and then they also have either a bunch of flats on the staff or a bunch of sharps. So those are called key signatures. And a key signature essentially just tells us, like, if we were reading an actual piece of music, it would tell us, okay, for example, if there's an F sharp in the key signature, it would tell us, okay, every single time you see an F, make sure it's F sharp. So it just sort of permanently turns a note into a sharp or flat for the duration of that piece of music, or until the key signature changes. You can actually have key signature changes in music as well. So for us to figure out by how many sharps or how many flats are in a key signature and what the sharps and flats are, so that we can figure out what notes are actually in a key, we need to go through this process. So first of all, we need to remember what's called the order of flats and the order of sharps. So let's go over the order of flats first, actually, because I think this one's a little bit easier. So the order of flats is B, E, A, D, G, C, F. So whenever you see the flats in a flat key signature, for example, if you look on the key signature for F major, right there, okay, see there's only one flat in it? Well, we take the first flat in the order, and that's what it is. So it's actually a B flat note, okay? And I could actually write little flats here just so you know. That means it's actually a flatted note. So if there's a key signature, let's say, that has 5 flats in it, well, it means we would take the first 5 of these flats, and those are the notes that are going to be flat. Besides that, anything else is going to be natural. So remember, our musical alphabet is A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. So look, we just had that example of a key signature as 5 flats. So that's actually the key of D flat, if you look at that. So that means that we know that B has to be flat. Out of all the letters in the musical alphabet, we also know that E has to be flat. We also know that A has to be flat. We also know that D has to be flat. And then we know that G has to be flat. So actually in that key, they're all flat except for the note C and the note F. Okay, so it tells you, okay, we have 7 letters in the musical alphabet. By default, they're all natural. They're not sharp or flat. But when we're picking our key to play in, or we're instructed to play in this key, we have to know which of those we need to turn sharp or flat if it's not in the key of C. Again, if it's not in the key of C, that's the only time this comes up, which is almost all the keys except for C. C is the only one that doesn't have any sharps or flats. So the order of flats is very, very important to memorize. And then now we also need to memorize the order of sharps. So the order of sharps is really easy to memorize if you already have the order of flats memorized. By the way, order of flats, the way I like to memorize it is the word bead, just a bead, like a little bead, a jewel, a plastic small thing, and then GCF. So you remember bead, GCF. That's how I like to remember it. And then the order of sharps, guess what? It's the exact same thing, but just backwards. So it's going to be F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp, E sharp, and B sharp. And yes, I am fully aware that there's not really such thing as E sharp and B sharp. There is such thing as E sharp and B sharp, but there's another name for E sharp, which is F. And there's another name for B sharp, which is C. But sometimes conceptually, when it comes to getting some of these keys, there might be some annoying E sharps and B sharps in there. That's a discussion for another video. So it's literally the exact same thing. And it relates to the circle of fifths because it's like if you're going either backwards or forwards on the circle of fifths. You can go around it either way. So in order to figure out what a flat key signature is, let's figure that out first. So that way, whenever you see a key signature or you need to reverse engineer it, you can figure this out. What we do for a flat key signature is we take the second to last flat, and then that's the key. So for example, if we have a key signature that has two flats in it, let's say B flat and E flat. Well, the second to last flat is B flat. So it's actually the key of B flat. And now look over in the circle of fifths there. Guess what? B flat has two flats in it. Key of B flat major. So it has all the notes natural except for B flat and E flat. So same thing, let's do one more. What if we had a key signature that has one flat in it? This is a tricky one, actually. So if it only has one flat in it, you actually circle back to the end of the order of flats. So remember, this is a cycle. In music, almost everything is just a repeating cycle that can repeat over and over. So that if we counted the last flat as coming before the first flat, because it's in a cycle, it's actually F. So the key of F only has one flat. So that one is the only thing that's a little bit confusing about figuring out a flat key signature, is that you have to kind of remember that the key signature that only has one flat in it is F major. Okay, cool. So what about sharps? Sharps is just a little eensy beensy bit harder, but it's still pretty easy. So with the order of sharps, or figuring out a sharp key signature, what we do is we find the last sharp, and then we go up a half step, and then that's the name of the key. So for example, if we have a note or a key signature that has one sharp in it, F sharp. We know, by the way, you don't even need to know how to read music in order to understand this, because if you just count how many sharps are in a key signature, that will tell you which ones to take as long as you memorize the order flats and the order of sharps. Because if there's only one sharp, it's always going to be F sharp. It's always going to be the first one in the order. Or if there's 5 of them, you take the first 5. So it's never going to be just like one random sharp from the middle. It always starts from the beginning. So we take F sharp, and then, so I'll actually play it here. F sharp. And if you go up a half step from F sharp, that's actually a G. So guess what? It's the key of G major. Key of G major only has one sharp in it, and it's F sharp. Let's do one more, and then we'll wrap this video up. So let's take one that has 4 sharps in it. 4 sharps is F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp. So what's the last sharp in there? Well, it's D sharp. So D sharp is a half step below the letter E. And so that's the name of the key. E major has 4 sharps. And what do you know if you go over to the circle of fifths on the right-hand side of the screen? Bingo, right there, E major has 4 sharps in it. Okay? So this is essentially the only thing that you should really be using the circle of fifths for. You can use it for other stuff, but if you want to understand how to play in all 12 keys really well, and you want to understand how to know what notes are in those keys really well, this is what you have to do. By the way, you can actually learn this, of course, without even knowing the circle of fifths, learning all the order of flats, order of sharp stuff that I just showed you. Actually, I learned it when I was probably in middle school. Yeah, when I was in middle school. I didn't know what the freaking circle of fifths was or any of that stuff. But when I practice things, like if I practice my triads, my major triads in different keys, I will go along the circle of fifths sometimes as a practice method. I'll say, okay, let me stay in the key of C for right now. Okay, good. I got the key of C down. Okay, now let's go to the key of G and go around the circle of fifths so that we're going to keys that aren't too distant musical conceptual wise, right? We're only changing one note when we move from one key to the next key to the next key to the next key, whether it's going right or it's going left on the circle of fifths. I hope that this was a helpful video for you. If you want to understand all of the concepts that are actually way simpler than this, really, I'm telling you, it's really way simpler. The things that you need to understand to be able to master the guitar fretboard and understand how to play in all 12 keys and play chords all over the guitar fretboard and know how to solo in any key all over the guitar fretboard, make sure you head on over to Jamsville.com and check out the Jamsville GPS Fretboard Fundamentals course right now. So until next time, listen, learn, and jam.